We're doing a quick and casual video today. I have a bit of a migraine going on just now, so if I'm not overly coherent, that is why. I apologise, but I thought that it would be fun for me to take you on a little trip down memory lane and show you some of the books that I really enjoyed when I was younger. Starting off with the first book that I vividly remember reading, and I think that I was probably about 6-ish when I read this, maybe 7. I'm not 100% sure. And that's Winnie the Pooh by A.A. Milne. This, you can probably tell, the cover's a little bit yellowing now because I've had it for so long. I got it for Christmas in 1992, which was my second Christmas. So I was only 1 at the time. And it's got illustrations all the way through it. I think I must have been 7 when I read this actually, because I'm pretty sure I was in primary school at the time, which starts at the age of 7. And it's 145 pages, so I think that's pretty good for a 7-year-old. Not that I would know, but I still absolutely love this copy, which by the way is 27 years old now, so amazing. But I just have such fond memories of reading this book. And then I have all of my kids' books, all of the books I read in my childhood here on this shelf. So I can't remember when, but I did read the Mr. Men books. So there are those. I've got a couple of, so I've got Just So stories, Hans Christian Andersen fairy tales, and Aesop's fables. So I read some of those. I've got a children's poetry book here, which I think I read some of them as well. I also have buried here, oh yeah, I had this Puffin book of poetry, which I read as well. See if I can find a short one to read you. A bee, it's after me, and that is why I flee, I flee. This bee appears to be very, very angry. So that's kind of cute. I also had my Dr. Seuss storybook, which I really enjoyed. This has McElligot's Pull, the Zax, the Lorax, and Scrambled Eggs Super. But my favourite Dr. Seuss was Green Eggs and Ham. I don't have a copy of that because I always used to read my mum's copy of it when I was growing up, but I absolutely love that poem. And then I've got this copy of 12 children's stories, but in Portuguese, and I used to really enjoy getting my dad or my grandma to read these to me. So it's just a collection of 12 children's stories, so like Aladdin, and it's all illustrated too. Sleeping Beauty there, Little Red Riding Hood, Hansel and Gretel, although it's actually in Portuguese, the direct translation, A Cozinha de Chocolate, is the chocolate kitchen, so it's not quite the same name, but I think it's just Hansel and Gretel. Yeah, it is. It's Hansel and Gretel. The Ugly Duckling. Oh. There once was an ugly duckling with feathers all fluffy and brown. Then there's one, O Polegarzinho, but I think that must be a Portuguese one because I don't recognise the story. And then, oh, what's it called? Puss in Boots. O Gato dos Botas. Then we have Cinderella. Oh, look at that picture. So cute. Alice in Wonderland. I showed that one for Natalie. Oh, and that one. I completely forgot that Alice was in here. I'll have to get my sister to have a look. Little Mermaid. I think that might... No, there's a couple more. Beauty and the Beast. Jungle Book. So that's really cute. I particularly wanted to show you that one because I really enjoyed that, and I don't have them anymore, but I also really enjoyed listening to these tapes of various stories like The Little Matchstick Girl and The Emperor's New Clothes and The Girl and the Golden Goose and all those kind of fables. My sister and I used to play them on a cassette player. Those were my first ever audiobooks, I guess. And also, every Christmas, my sister and I really enjoyed reading the 12 Days of Christmas poem, of course, which always seemed like a lot thicker of a book when I was a child, but actually that's pretty, it's pretty thin, isn't it? Okay, and then we move up to the stuff that I read when I was a little bit older, including the stuff down here, but that's not too much in shop because otherwise I'm not in shop. So we of course have Harry Potter over here. I think that I only actually caught up to the series after The Goblet of Fire came out, so I think I read books 1, 2, 3 and 4 back to back, and then I read them as they were coming out from Order of the Phoenix onwards. I have my copy of Winnie the Pooh just stored here just because it's one of my favourite books, but I really like that there. I absolutely loved the, what's this series called? The Wind on Fire series. So book 1 is The Wind Singer, book 2 is Slaves of Mastery, and book 3 is Fire Song. And Wind Singer was actually required reading at school for year 7 or 8. So I would have been either 11 or 12, I think, when I read this for the first time. And then I liked book 1 so much, which for something a school made me read is pretty good. Then I liked it so much that I ended up reading the rest of the series, and I've actually reread this series quite a few times, and I'm tempted to try and find it on audio so that I can pick it back up again. And then I also really enjoyed The Alchemist, The Secrets of the Immortal Nicholas Flamel by Michael Scott. This is book 1 in the Secrets of the Immortal Nicholas Flamel series, which I've recently started rereading because I read book 1 and 2 for sure, but then I haven't read the rest of the series because I'd kind of grown out of it. By then I discovered it quite late anyway. I also vividly remember that the first grown-up book I ever read was The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien, and I'm not a huge fan of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, either in film or on the page, because I don't know why. I do know why I don't like the films. I don't like the films because my mum made us watch them like literally every weekend for several years, and so I just got sick of them. In terms of the books, I just found Tolkien's writing style far too descriptive for my personal reading preference, and I know that's the case for a lot of people, but because The Hobbit is a young adult or middle grade book, it's not so heavy on the description, and so it's just a little bit of an easier read. But I remember distinctly that I read this when I was 9 because my teacher at school didn't think that I was able to read books with words in them, and she wouldn't let me take books from the reading boxes that weren't picture books. So I went home and took, not this copy, but my mum's old battered beaten up copy of The Hobbit off the shelf and read it cover to cover, and went into school and put the book down and said, right, I've read this, can I please now read some books with actual words in them, since I can clearly quite easily manage to read something that was originally published 1937. So, you know, if a 9-year-old can handle something written like 60 odd years before she was born, then I think that she can handle something a little bit more complex than a picture book. you know. Another series that I really enjoyed, possibly when I was around 12 or 13, was Eragon, The Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini. Again, this is a series I haven't finished yet, but I am currently trying to reread the books. I read this one, like I said, when I was about 12 or 13, and then I read Eldest, and I think that's it. I might have read Brisinga as well, but I'm not 100% sure. And another series that I absolutely loved and reread is one that I have mentioned on my channel before, and that is the Mediator series by Meg Cabot, and you can tell that these are quite well loved, these copies. I read them at least twice while I was on holiday at the beach, so they're a little bit beach worn. And then another series that I've mentioned on my channel a fair bit is the Symphony of Ages by Elizabeth Hayden, which I probably started reading when I was around 14, I want to say. So this is probably the first epic fantasy series I ever read. And at the time that I started reading the series, there were 6 books out, so I read all 6 of them. There are now 9, so I need to catch up, and again, currently rereading. So I really loved those. And then, of course, I had my Twilight phase. So I didn't discover the series until the films came out. So I was probably like 16 or 17, so a little bit late to the party with this one. But I still really loved them, and I reread them several times. I didn't really care that I was a little bit older than the other people who were loving it. I was just really, really enjoying about it, and I was Team Edward. So, I mean, none of the relationships in this were healthy. I mean, for goodness sake, Jacob ends up with a baby. Let's just not go there. But, you know, books can still be enjoyable and be problematic. I also went through this phase where I really enjoyed mystery and crime books, and this was probably when I was around 12 or 13. So I remember reading Deja Dead, which is a book that I picked up second hand from somewhere, I can't remember where, and I read it a couple of times and really enjoyed it. I also took out quite a few books from the library, including Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. I don't know what it was, around 12, 13, I just read so much crime and murder mystery stuff. There was also this book, and I just cannot find it anywhere. I can't even remember what it's called, but it was about this professional tennis player who gets accused of murdering a number of other tennis players that she was going to go up against. And it's like a murder mystery type thing, and I loved that. I read that several times as well, but I have absolutely no idea what it was called, so I can't find it, and I borrowed it from the library. Also, at the age of 14, 15, I loved Jane Eyre. This isn't the edition that I actually read. This is one of the really nice penguin cloth-bound classics, but I mean, a lot of people don't like Jane Eyre and again find it problematic. I don't necessarily, as we've discussed, have an issue with problematic fiction. I can recognise that something's problematic and still enjoy it. And bear in mind, this was first published in 1847. So if the relationship was slightly unhealthy by today's standards, that's not necessarily surprising, given that it was written over 150 years ago, you know? So, but I really enjoyed Jane Eyre, and I read it several times. I also remember reading this Penny Vincenzi book called The Best of Times when I was on holiday one year in Portugal. I remember picking it up at the airport, probably because it's a chunker, and as you may know, I like a chunky book. This one is 880 pages, so it certainly kept me going. It's very beachy, and it follows the lives of various people following an accident on the motorway, and I really enjoyed it actually. It's kind of a mystery, kind of a contemporary type of book and I enjoyed it. And then when I went to university, I was reading law degree, so I just did not read very much at all, and thus began my first super long 3-year, in fact, reading slump, which was resolved in part by reading the Hunger Games trilogy, which I don't have physical copies of because I read them as ebooks, but I absolutely loved that series. So I would have been around 2021 when I read that series, and also when I read the Black Magician trilogy by Trudy Canavan, which again, I've mentioned it on my channel before, it's one of my absolute favourites. And I read the Hunger Games trilogy, and then I read it again, and then I read this, and then I read it again, and then I read Hunger Games again, and then I read this again because I just loved it so much, and I had missed reading so much, and I was so out of the world of reading that I didn't know what else there was to read, so I just stuck to the stuff that I was really enjoying. Plus, I'm the kind of person that really enjoys rereading anyway, so that just worked for me. But that, I think, is where I'm going to leave it for now. That was when I got back into reading after university, and I had a couple of slumps after that before I got into my real reading place after discovering BookTube a couple of years ago. Let me know what you read and enjoyed reading when you were younger. I'd be super interested to know. But that's it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video and want to see more like this from me, then do think about hitting that subscribe button, and I hope to see you here again soon. Thanks! Bye!